Sudan rarely appears in travel conversations. When it does, it's usually simplified, flattened into one idea. But standing inside Sudan feels nothing like that, because scattered across this country are places that feel vast, silent, and strangely untouched, as if time slowed down here and never restarted. Not hidden, just overlooked. And perhaps that's what preserved them. The world moved its attention elsewhere. Sudan kept existing, where the desert holds structure. In northern Sudan, the desert stretches endlessly. Sand, stone, heat. Then suddenly, sharp silhouettes rise from the ground. This is Meroe. Here's the shock. There are more pyramids here than in Egypt, standing alone in open desert. No fences, no crowds, no dramatic entrances. The land doesn't frame them. It ignores them. You can walk directly to them. Touch the stone if you want. Stand in their shadow without anyone watching. The structures here number over 200. They're steeper than their Egyptian counterparts. Smaller, yes, but somehow more direct in their presence. History here isn't curated. It's left exposed. Wind erases footprints within hours. Each visit feels like the first. The Kushite civilization built these tombs between 300 BCE and 300 CE. Royalty was buried here. Power was demonstrated here. Then the kingdom faded. The pyramids remained. No restoration teams arrived. No interpretation centers were built. The desert simply absorbed them back into its rhythm. What's unsettling is the access, the openness, the lack of protection. These structures survived 2,000 years of exposure. They'll likely survive 2,000 more, with or without witnesses, when the desert turns volcanic. Travel inland and the land tightens. Rock replaces sand. The horizon compresses. This is the Bayuda Desert. Here's what feels wrong. The desert isn't flat. Dark volcanic rock interrupts the landscape. Movement slows. Sound disappears. Black basalt formations rise without pattern. Some jagged, some smooth, all volcanic in origin. This area was geologically violent once. Now it's geologically frozen. The rock absorbs heat differently than sand, holds it longer, releases it slower. Walking here requires constant navigation. The ground doesn't cooperate. Your pace fractures. This isn't a place you pass through quickly. It resists speed. And maybe that's why it remains unvisited, because modern travel values velocity. The Bayuda values endurance. And then the land rises alone, where a single mountain dominates everything. Near the Nile stands Jebel Barkal. From a distance, it looks modest. Up close, it controls the space around it. Here's the shock. This mountain shaped belief, settlement, and power, simply by existing where it does. No dramatic height, no extreme cliffs, just presence. The ancient Egyptians considered this place sacred. They believed the god Amun resided inside the mountain, not metaphorically, literally inside. Temples were built at its base. Pharaohs traveled here to legitimize their rule. Kings of Kush were crowned in its shadow. The mountain measures roughly 100 meters tall. By mountain standards, it's barely a hill. But it stands alone, surrounded by flatness, visible for kilometers in every direction. That isolation gave it power. Carved into the rock face is a stone cobra. Natural erosion shaped it. Ancient peoples interpreted it as divine confirmation. The land doesn't need scale here. It needs position. And Jebel Barkal occupies the exact position that makes flat land feel small. Ruins still cluster around its base. Temple columns, offering chambers, inscriptions in languages most can't read. Visitors are rare. Cards are present but relaxed. The site doesn't feel protected. It feels attended. There's a difference. If you're interested in places the world stopped paying attention to, but never stopped existing, subscribe. This channel explores destinations shaped by silence and scale, where the Nile behaves differently. In Sudan, the Nile doesn't feel controlled. It bends. It spreads. It slows. Through the Nubian desert, the river becomes the only moving element. Here's what feels unsettling. Green exists only where the river allows it. Beyond that, nothing negotiates. The Nile splits into channels here, creates islands, forms cataracts where rock resists the current. Egypt dammed its section of the Nile decades ago. Sudan has fewer controls. The river still floods seasonally in some areas, still retreats, still dictates which crops survive. Villages line the banks, narrow strips of cultivation. Then immediate desert. The contrast is absolute. No gradual transition, no buffer zone. Life here doesn't expand, it aligns. Traditional sailboats called felucas still navigate these waters. They move slowly, capture wine that barely exists. The pace feels pre-industrial, not because of poverty, because of adaptation. The river moves at its own speed, so do the people who depend on it. What's remarkable is the continuity. Communities here have lived the same way for centuries, not by choice alone, by geographic necessity. The desert permits no alternatives. When the desert meets the sea, on Sudan's eastern edge, the land drops into water. This is the Red Sea coast of Sudan. Just offshore lies Sanganeb Atoll. Here's the shock. One of the most intact coral systems in the Red Sea, with almost no development nearby. The sea here isn't framed as a destination, it's left alone. Sanganeb sits roughly 25 kilometers offshore, a ring of coral surrounding deep water. A lighthouse stands at its center. Built by the British in the 1900s, still operational, still staffed. The coral here survived decades of warming waters. Bleaching events that destroyed reefs elsewhere left this mostly intact. Why? Depth, current, distance from agricultural runoff. The reef flourishes because nothing disturbs it. Diving here requires effort. No resorts nearby, no day trip infrastructure. Boats must be chartered from Port Sudan. That barrier keeps visitor numbers low. Silence continues underwater. Schools of hammerhead sharks pass through seasonally. Manta rays glide above the reef. Coral formations grow in structures that feel architectural. But no one marketed this. No one built around it. The reef exists in functional isolation. And perhaps that's what kept it alive, where absence is the defining feature. What surprises visitors most about Sudan isn't danger. It's space. Large areas contain. No signage, no tourism infrastructure, no attempt to guide you. The land doesn't explain itself. It doesn't invite interpretation. It simply exists, without translation. This absence feels intentional at first. Then you realize it's just neglect, not hostile, just unattended. Roads exist, but aren't always marked. Archaeological sites are accessible but not maintained. Natural landmarks appear without warning. You might drive for hours seeing nothing, then encounter something extraordinary, with no plaque, no explanation, no context. That forces a different kind of engagement. You can't consume these places quickly. You can't photograph them and move on feeling satisfied. Because without context, the experience remains incomplete. And maybe that's the point. These places weren't built for casual observation. They were built to endure. The fact that they're still here, unprotected, unexplained, largely unvisited, says something about endurance. Why Sudan feels unsettling. Sudan doesn't compress experiences. It spreads them out. Nothing is rushed. Nothing is highlighted. Nothing competes for attention. That's what feels uncomfortable. Modern travel teaches us to expect curation, highlights reels, best of lists, optimized routes. Sudan offers none of that. The country doesn't perform. It doesn't advertise. It doesn't summarize itself. It waits. And that waiting feels like resistance, not to visitors specifically, to the entire concept of tourism as spectacle. There's no attempt to make things easier, no concessions to expectation, no softening of difficulty. The heat is extreme. The distances are vast. The infrastructure is minimal, and none of that is apologized for. What this creates is a relationship based on terms you don't set. You adjust to Sudan. It doesn't adjust to you. That inversion, that refusal to accommodate, is what makes the experience so distinct and so memorable. Sudan isn't empty. It's uninterrupted. Pyramids without crowds, deserts without edges, a river that still dictates life, a sea that remains untouched. These places weren't shaped for visibility. They weren't shaped for visitors. They were shaped to last. And they have. Through empires, through conflicts, through centuries of selective attention. They remained. If this video changed how you think about Sudan, subscribe. Because some of the most remarkable places on Earth aren't famous. They're simply still standing, waiting for whoever comes next, without expectation, without urgency, just presence.